Thank you very much, Brianna. And thanks to all of you for being here. We really appreciate you taking time from your schedules to join us today on what's obviously a really important issue. We're here today to discuss President Trump's cruel and unlawful decision yesterday to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, well known as DACA. And you're going to be hearing from some folks who we greatly appreciate here today who are directly impacted by this cruel policy. We also want to share what we're going to do about it as the state of Washington. So I'll be giving you some introductory remarks. I'll be followed by our Governor, Jay Inslee, who I really appreciate taking time from his extremely busy schedule to join us today. And just a note on Governor Inslee, I'll be introducing him shortly, but you know, I work with a lot of AGs around the country, and I know that I am especially blessed in this dark time in our nation's history to have a governor who is as vocal in his views on some of the outrageous things that are happening seemingly on a daily basis with this administration. And to say he's supportive of my office and my legal team would be a significant understatement. And I just want to really emphasize how much, that's just one thing I have to worry about. You know, there's a lot we have to worry about in the office, but the support of the governor and what we're doing is not one of those things, and that's something I do not take for granted. I'm also joined by a couple folks who you will recognize from earlier litigation around the travel ban. So to my far right is Marcia Chen. Marcia is an attorney, an assistant attorney general in our Wing Luke Civil Rights Unit. She was also very involved in the travel ban litigation. And then Colleen Melody is on my far left. Colleen Melody. Colleen's the head of that Civil Rights Unit. We are missing today our Solicitor General, Noah Purcell. He does have a good excuse. He and his wife had a baby yesterday, so report everything is good and healthy, but Noah's with us in spirit. But as obviously you might imagine, been very involved in this as well. As I mentioned before, the governor and I are both very honored to be joined by a group of dreamers today. Again, folks who will be directly impacted by the president's decision if it's allowed to stand. And so what we're going to do is I'll speak first, the governor will then speak. We'll then have each of these individuals introduce themselves, and two of them at the end, Paul and Faride, will give lengthier remarks. But we're joined by Graciela Nunez, Montse Padilla, Ray Corona, and Jose Manuel Correa. Those four will introduce themselves briefly and tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll have two dreamers speak in more detail at the conclusion. And then, of course, we'll be happy to take your questions. So today we are filing, and the complaint will literally be filed any minute now, a multi-state lawsuit challenging the Trump administration's decision to roll back protections for dreamers. The list at this time, and just keep in mind this is a fluid situation. I expect additional states to join this complaint or file other lawsuits. But at this point, there are a total of 12 entities, 11 states, and the District of Columbia. I'll just read through them briefly. Washington, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Mexico, Illinois, Hawaii, North Carolina, Oregon, Rhode Island, Washington, D.C., and I believe Delaware as well. Am I right, Colleen? And Delaware as well. So hopefully that adds up to 12. But again, this is I just want to emphasize the fluid situation, but that's the current status of the states and the District of Columbia they'll be filing today. We'll be filing this lawsuit together as a group, all as plaintiffs in the Eastern District of New York. My team's been working, Marcia and Colleen and the team have been working on this for weeks in anticipation of the president taking an action along the lines of what he took yesterday. It's been an intense body of work. Washington has co-led this effort with Massachusetts and New York. It has been a significant amount of work, as you might imagine, to put together a complaint of this complexity and size with the declarations we'll be talking about. And my goal is to give you a flavor of the legal arguments that we'll be making as well. But I deeply appreciate the legal team, again, working through their weekends, giving up their Labor Day weekends, working closely with other states to make this happen. It's a big body of work. So what I'll do is talk through a little bit about the DACA program and the benefits of that program to our state, and then briefly detail our legal arguments before I turn over to the governor. As you know, there are about 800,000 dreamers in our country. There are more than 17,000 dreamers in the state of Washington alone. They were brought to this country as children by their parents through no fault of their own. DACA has allowed them to remain in this country to work legally, to open bank accounts, purchase cars and homes, attend and pay tuition in our state's colleges without fear of deportation. They contribute about $51 million every year in state and local taxes in Washington state. Without DACA, one estimate suggests the state economy could lose nearly $260 million in tax revenues over the next decade. The University of Washington, Washington State University, as well as Columbia Basin College and Big Bend Community College have also contributed declarations to our complaint. They've been a key player in this litigation, as they were with the travel ban. Thanks to DACA, Dreamers attend our colleges and universities. More than 100 attend the University of Washington, and more than 150 attend Washington State, just to give you two examples. The President's cruel decision not only impacts all these Dreamers in Washington State, but it will also impact our economy, our business, and our state as a whole. That's why companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Starbucks have written strong declarations in support of our lawsuit. I deeply appreciate those entities taking the time to step up and support this litigation in such a meaningful way. Additionally, state agencies are filing declarations as well. It's our colleagues in state government who are Dreamers as well, who are working every day on behalf of the people of the state who are adversely impacted, and that's why you're seeing declarations from our state treasurer and other state agencies as well. We deeply appreciate all of their support. I'll try and be a little bit brief on the legal claims, give you enough detail so you understand where we're going. As is always the case, legal claims are complex, right? There's been a lot of work going into them. I'll do my best to speak about them at a high level, but obviously we're happy to take any questions you have in more detail about any of these claims. Think of our claims in two buckets. We have constitutional claims. I'll talk about equal protection and due process. Constitutional claims. We also have statutory claims. We allege that the Trump administration is violating federal statutes. So think of sort of two buckets of claims. I'll start with something called the Administrative Procedure Act. Now, my suspicion is a lot of folks' eyes will glaze over, even lawyers, once you start talking about the Administrative Procedure Act. Okay, that's I get that. But it may sound technical, but believe me, it is not technical. Just to give you one example, when President Obama issued his executive order on immigration, DACA, a few years ago, when Republican AGs challenged that successfully in a Texas federal court, they were successful based on an Administrative Procedure Act claim. That's what stopped President Obama's executive action on immigration, was an APA claim, an Administrative Procedure Act claim. So it may sound technical, I get that, but these things matter a great deal. And so speaking to that at a high level, we have two claims within what I call the APA, the Administrative Procedure Act. One, importantly, is that the President's action is what lawyers would call arbitrary and capricious. The action was arbitrary and capricious. The stated premise for the President's action is that DACA is illegal, right? That's what you heard yesterday. DACA is illegal. There's just one problem with that. No court has actually held that. In fact, up until yesterday, the Department of Justice has repeatedly argued that DACA is legal. Overnight, there was a change, and that's something you cannot do. There is a standard. You cannot take an action that's arbitrary or capricious. We've had months, years of assertions that DACA is legal from the federal government. No court has said it's illegal. The federal government cannot, without any process at all, claim that's no longer the case. Secondly, within the Administrative Procedure Act, we have a separate claim. We call this a process claim. So I have 9-year-old twins. Sorry for the twins analogy, but when they do their homework, I say you have to show your work when you do your math. You've got to show the work. You can't just give me the answer. You've got to show how you got to that answer. Well, we have the Administrative Procedure Act, from a process standpoint, requires the federal government to essentially show their work when they're making certain important decisions. They can't just announce it. They've got to go through a process to do it. Again, this is not technical. We have filed 14 lawsuits against this administration. I'm not keeping score, but so far we're 4-0, okay? Every federal judge who's examined any of our claims has agreed with the state of Washington, okay? Some of those claims have been under the APA, and we prevailed because the federal government has not shown their work. You can't just sometimes unilaterally make a change. You've got to go through a process to do that, and it's our assertion in this case they failed the APA, the Administrative Procedure Act, on that front as well. We are also alleging that the President's action violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. I might add, the APA claim, that would essentially stop the President's action in its track. As Colleen has said to me, as a good analogy, think of it as a board game. They'd have to go back to start and start all over again. We are also alleging that it violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. Think again back to the travel ban. What we had to show with the travel ban was that a motivating factor behind the president's decision announcing the travel ban was racial animus, right? Was animus towards Muslims. A key thing here is that it doesn't have to be the primary motivating factor or the only motivating factor. It just has to be a motivating factor in a decision. We're making the same allegation in essence here as well. The president has made numerous statements on the campaign trail and in office disparaging Mexicans, calling them criminals, thugs, bad hombres, among other names. Nearly 80% of Dreamers are of Mexican descent. In our lawsuit, we allege the president's own statements make clear that the majority of Dreamers are being targeted for discriminatory treatment based on their national origin. I would just ask you and the folks who are listening or viewing this right now to ask yourself one question. If the overwhelming majority of Dreamers were Caucasian, does anybody really think this president would have taken the action he took yesterday? Finally, we're also claiming that the president's action violates the Regulatory Flexibility Act. Now, admittedly, I've never referred to the Regulatory Flexibility Act before, but it's an important act, adopted by Congress with bipartisan support. What it does is support small businesses, nonprofits, local jurisdictions of government. And what it says is if you're going to take an action, a federal agency, that's going to harm, for example, a small business, you've got to go through a process. You've got to analyze it. You've got to show your work. There's going to be a negative impact to small businesses. You can't just unilaterally do that. You've got to show your work. You have a process. You've got to analyze it, the pros and the cons. It's an act of the Congress, bipartisan act of the Congress. Again, this is about the proper procedure, which this administration has ignored time and again. And believe me, there are plenty of businesses and jurisdictions in this state and nonprofits that have invested significant resources into Dreamers like the folks who are here and the other 17,000 Dreamers in the state of Washington. They've invested in training. These are reliable, dependable, important employees for these businesses. For the federal government to just make a decision unilaterally, removing those employees from those businesses can only be done through a process that this federal government has not done. One more claim I want to mention, and this, the relief we're asking here is very, very important, and it does not go to whether DACA could go forward or not, but the implications in a very important respect if it does. So the previous claims would stop. Just want to be clear about that. Everything I've mentioned before would stop DACA from moving forward. We also have a due process claim. And what this goes to is how it would impact Dreamers and their families in a different way. The due process rights of Dreamers will be violated if information that they provided to the federal government is used against them or their families for immigration enforcement purposes. Something they were promised over and over and over again by the federal government would not happen. And yesterday's announcement makes no assurances that that information will not be used against them and their families, and that is not right. I'll have a few final comments after the governor speaks. You know, I know the governor and the folks who are up here with me agree, and you know, I try to think, well, what are the right words, right, for how outrageous this is. It's outrageous. It is. It's outrageous. You know, I'm not going to put up with it. The governor sure as hell is not going to put up with it. These folks aren't going to put up with it. It's not right. You know, and as Attorney General for the state of Washington, I fortunately have a hammer. It's the law. We've beaten the Trump administration over and over again. We are careful about the lawsuits we bring. We are thoughtful about the lawsuits we bring. And whenever I think about our lawsuits, we talk about the same questions. Are Washingtonians being harmed? Do we have good legal arguments? And do I have standing to bring the lawsuit on behalf of the people of the state? Man, when it comes to our Washingtonians being harmed, it doesn't get much bigger than this. Put yourself in their shoes. You're a dreamer. Our country is going to deport you back to a country you may not even know. Can it be more cruel than that? Honestly. It doesn't make any damn sense. Honestly. As a lawyer, though, I have to focus on the law, right? That's my training. That's my job. As cruel as it is, importantly, however, also unlawful. And that's what this lawsuit is all about. So with that, I'm going to turn to the governor for his comments, and then we'll hear from the most important group here, which the governor and I both agree, which are the Dreamers themselves. Governor?
We all want to thank Bob for his thoughtful legal analysis and his strength of purpose to make sure that Washington State is protected. And this is yet another in a series of legal actions to insist that the basic values and the people we treasure in the state of Washington are protected. Bob, thanks for your leadership. We appreciate it. The state right now is under a dark pall, and it's not just the smoke from the fires. It is a dark pall of cruelty and inhumanity which has covered this land as a result of this president's willful, malicious bigotry, which has attempted to stifle the dreams of some of the strongest, most ambitious, most vibrant, most brilliant people in our blessed community, and that's the Dreamers. And I understand that this darkness is a troubled time, but I want to say that the wave of revulsion, the wave of outrage, the voices that have been calling from across the United States is a good sign that the American dream is still alive and well. And in this dark time, we have a half a dozen bright lights of dreamers here today. So I want to say that we ought to be resolute and inspired by the voices we're hearing across the United States and here today in the state of Washington. Now, we know what this is. This is not an aberration by Donald Trump. This is not one fumble in an otherwise stellar career of protecting American values of fairness and justice. This is one more of a long chain and train of abuses that this president has attempted to foist on this bright nation. It started with his racial lie, claiming that our president wasn't born in the United States. It was followed by his clear intent to ban people of one religious faith from the United States. And it is followed up now with yet another chapter in the long, terrible ordeal that is being written by this president. And when we are claiming there is a violation of due process, you bet we are right, because it's just what Donald Trump does. When he's in trouble, he tries to blame the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. And that is yet what we are seeing here today. He's in trouble on multiple fronts, and he's trying to take it out on dreamers, and that is unacceptable in our state. Now, here's one of the reasons it's unacceptable. I understand the careful analysis by Bob on this, but here's how I look at it. Uncle Sam went to these dreamers and said, if you will open up your lives to me, tell us where you live, tell us where you were born, telling us where we can find you, we will make sure that the door is open to the American dream. Donald Trump wants to now have Uncle Sam pull the rug out from underneath these dreamers. Well, I don't know, you can say what you want about the current occupant of the White House, but Uncle Sam is not a con man. And we will not allow this con to be perpetrated on the dreamers. And it is a con. Now, let me tell you what the nature of this, how I look at this. I remember I met a young man in Tacoma. He was in high school. And this is when we were trying to pass our version of the DREAM Act, which we eventually passed in the state of Washington to make sure these people had access to financial aid. And this young man said, you know, Governor, you expect us to graduate, you urge us to graduate, but then when we graduate, you won't help us go to college. Now we're going to turn around to these people. We've said if you keep your nose clean and work hard and go to college and go to school, we're going to pull the rug out from under you. That is a con, and it is a long train of cons that has tried to be foisted on this country by this president, and it will not stand. Now, the president did not even have the common decency to go out and face the American people with this outrage. He sent somebody else. And I think that's a testament to a little lack of courage in this regard. And now the president is trying to say, well, just go blame Congress. You don't have to blame me. Well, I want to make clear what is the current status here. The president wants to hold these dreamers hostage in the not always enlightened halls of Congress. And you can be assured at this moment that many of the members of Congress who are expressing rightful emotional empathy with the Dreamers are scheming for a way to use them as hostages to get some other legislative goal that they want. Maybe it's a wall that isn't going to be built. Maybe it's a tax cut that they want. Maybe it's something else. I'm here to say these people should be treated better than being hostages. And if the president would go out there tomorrow like he should, which is to ask Congress to pass a DREAM Act, a standalone clean act next week, perhaps we could do it. But that's not what's going on here. And people got to realize that this is a hostage-taking exercise. Now, one other comment about why this is important to the state of Washington. It is important from a sense of justice, but it is also important on the ability of our state to build an economy. Yesterday I was at breakfast just a few blocks from here, and Howard Behar, a former leader of Starbucks, came over and said, hey, is there anything I can do about this? I've got 5 people working for me today in leadership positions who are here because of the DACA program. This is going to hurt my business. This is going to hurt the economy of the state of Washington. And by the way, I don't know about you, but I was a little offended when I heard Jeff Sessions trying to tell these people they're sort of related to gang members somehow. These are business leaders. And in fact, a review has shown that Dreamers are starting businesses at almost twice the rate as non-Dreamers. These are the people who are building our economy. And they ought to be seen as business leaders, not hostages. So I want to thank Bob's efforts. I look forward to yet another success, and I look forward to that dream being kept alive. We still believe in America. I know these people behind me do too, and we believe we're going to win this ultimately.